So since phase one, we've gotten into some preliminary environmental review. Basically, we first of all went through and just sort of did a desktop scan of what each of the sites look like in terms of wetlands, floodplains, looking over some of the socioeconomic information, as well as looking at locations like parklands, cemeteries, churches, schools, all those types of things. Just what's available in databases, just to see what's there, what we would want to avoid, what type of impacts we would minimize, things like that. And then what we actually did too is I went and I met with the Corps of Engineers, brought with me what we showed to the public in September in terms of sort of that interim draft. It was a little bit more developed than phase one, but not what you'll see here today. Brought those with me and just sort of sat down and started to get the dialogue going on, how does this hit them? What can we do to kind of start talking about the potential impacts that are out there, looking ahead to getting environmental clearance and permitting for these types of sites. And so the Corps of Engineers offered to coordinate getting a preliminary review with a lot of the other agencies because they're kind of already set up to do so. So basically they sent out the phase one report as well as the site layouts that were developed and shown to the public in September, and sent those out to all of their agency contacts, both in Missouri and Illinois they deal with here in this particular district, and to get feedback from everyone. And so here's a list of some of the various agencies that provided feedback with the Corps, Department of Conservation, Department of Natural Resources, Inland Marine Services, the EPA, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And so all those folks kind of took a look at what was going on, and this sort of gives you an overview of the types of comments that were received. Overall, all of them need more information to actually get into specifics about what they would want to see happen and what may or may not be of some concerns to them. Number one, seeing the previous site layouts. Forested wetlands and mitigation challenges are obviously something that are sort of the first things that come up with them in terms of what would we need to do to work together. I will say too that nothing came about that was a red flag or a showstopper, and I even specifically asked that to them. There weren't any types of potential impacts or like, whoa, you can't do that here. All of it was, here's the types of things that we see, this is what we need to do to work together to make this happen, and this is how we need to move forward. So I do want to mention that before I kind of go through the list here. Potential habitat for threatened endangered species. Got the pallid sturgeon in the area, potential Indiana bat territory, so you have to worry about tree clearance timing, things like that you are worked with roadway projects, with other development type projects. These are just the types of things that we need to account for when you're going to be developing some of these areas. These navigation and ecosystem sustainability programs, these NESPs, there's projects over on the Illinois bank line across from our port areas, and they don't really anticipate that's going to cause a lot of change over on the Missouri side, but it's something for us to be aware of. There's also some the Herculaneum side channel programs going on as well. Again, when I spoke to the Corps about these, again, it wasn't considered a showstopper. It was basically by working with them, they know the type of work that they're doing on the banks. A lot of it is habitat restoration. A lot of it is related to the pallid sturgeon, things like that. It changes the sedimentation that's going on in the river. And so it's about sitting down and talking about the implications not only of the footprint of the port, but the operations and what that's doing to the river and what that will be doing with their programs, and how we can kind of strike a balance between commerce on the river and what they're trying to do with with the wildlife in the area. The proximity to the existing river training structures, those are some of those things that are already put in place, the wing dams and the dikes that are out there. Again, it's all about looking at how the operations and the function of the port would interact with what's going on out there and what some of their programs are, so that they can see that things would be compatible. So that's basically the dialogue that they want to have about that. Obviously, the navigation channel, that's always something that they want to make sure that structures aren't going out, so that would be impeding the navigation channel. That's something obviously we know with the port operations, and that's something with the river industry, and the Coast Guard will be involved in those types of discussions, and with the permitting as well to be able to operate a port. They all also wanted to caution about making sure they account for the expense and the maintenance issues with dredging, specifically with the Slackwater Harbor proposal, something that obviously we've seen with other ports in the area, and just something that they wanted to make sure that was being discussed, and something that would be taken into account in terms of cost. and knowing how this river functions and what kind of sediment is out there. There have been other facilities that have greatly underestimated their disposal needs and the cost for that. And so that was something that various agencies had wanted to bring up as well. And then mostly from the EPA talked about the potential release and redistribution of contamination during construction, issues of what's in the soils that are out there. When you're doing construction along the river, you're not only dealing with fugitive dust emissions because of construction that you want to handle, but also what might be going into the nearby creek beds, into the rivers, what you're disturbing, what you're stirring up there, what might get into the water system, things like that. And that's something that's also handled a lot with in terms of when you're doing grading and things like that. You know, you're dealing with different certification of the drivers and operators of the machinery that's out there. Disposal becomes more important, and you know, if you've got dirt and soil that you need to take off the property where you're disposing that, whereas in other areas on projects you may not have to worry about that. So again, it's just additional considerations. That would be something down the road in terms of mandates for your contractors and things like that. So special provisions as you move forward with the project. So basically looking ahead for future implementation, it's really all about the process. We realize that we want to get federal funding involved to implement something of this magnitude. And typically, and while we don't know who the source of those funds would be at this time, typically using federal funding, that and the federal permitting, either of those trigger you going through an NEPA process, excuse me, where you have to go through an environmental clearance. Most likely it would be an environmental impact statement that does include a lot of public involvement in that process. And it's really over and above even what the Corps themselves would just require for their individual permitting process. And so basically the Corps of Engineers, when speaking with them about the process, as we anticipate where the funding may come from, starting with that agency, typically that's who your lead would be in a process like that, and getting the Corps involved and the way they collaborate with the other agencies to start a dialogue where you basically would have a scoping meeting and talk to everybody involved. How do we want to go about this? How do we go about getting everyone's needs met? And again, like I said, the Corps basically would default to that type of a larger process, which a lot of you may be familiar with local roadway projects and things like that, where you actually have to go through the public involvement of introducing what the project is. Agencies are involved along the way, throughout that entire process of development. They need more information than just conceptual plans. They need to get into a little bit more of design, looking more at your operations and things like that. To be able to get their questions answered. And like I said, those agencies are involved. Of course, now we're dealing with water because of port, but these are the same types of agencies that are involved with any of our other public infrastructure type of projects. And so basically, like I said, the process is what's going to be critical in terms of getting all the agencies involved and working through that. And so, like I said, the dialogue that I've had with the Corps so far, it was really all about, hey, get us the information that you need. These can be done on a port site by port site basis. It doesn't have to be done for all three at once. Basically, the only thing we need to do is make sure that we do consider overall impact. So if you're looking at developing one of the port sites and moving forward with that, even if it's going to be phased, if it's within the reasonably foreseeable future, you need to kind of look at what the impact of the whole port would be, even if we only have funding to start this one piece. Because obviously, once you kind of get rolling with the implementation, you get this facility up and going, the adjacent facility is going to be up and going, so they're going to want to kind of clear that entire area in terms of okaying that those operations are going to be compatible with their interests as well, to protect the natural and the human environment, cultural environment that's out there. So we like to move forward into the recommended development plan. Like I said, you'll see some changes that Christopher can kind of point out here, specifically even with the environmental issues, with the wetlands and things like that. You'll notice there is a difference from what you've seen back in September, in trying to kind of pull back out of some of those areas, minimize those impacts, to be able to kind of strike a balance a little bit to accommodate some of the concerns about the habitat in the wetland areas, and also having the fully operational port that you want to have for the area. Mm-hmm. Sure.